What's going on? Brandon Lee Gowton of Bleeding Green Nation and all of our listeners. I'm Jimmy Kempski from PhillyVoice.com. This is BGN Radio episode number 383, I think. Just got back from the NFL Combine in Indianapolis, Indiana. Always a good time out there. It's actually super warm, Brandon. It was like 70 one day out there. I did a long-ass walk, did a little 10-miler. Perfect weather. Strolling around India. It was actually the day I got in there. Nobody cares about that. We will get to what Howie and Nick talked about during their, yearly NFL Combine press conferences. Maybe just a few things that I heard in my time there. Otherwise, get into a little stare go defensive player edition. But before we do, Brandon. Which one are we doing first? Are we doing Righteous Felon or Wrong Crowd?
You pick, Jimmy.
Let's do Wrong Crowd this time. So,
all right.
You want
look at that? Did you see the screen there?
Oh, look at that!
Yeah. So if you're not watching on the the Bleeding Green Nation YouTube channel, you can see there's a little ticker at the bottom of the screen that has some of the information for your Wrong Crowd beer. We're living in the 21st century, Jimmy.
Amazing.
Look at this modern technology. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's fine. They're in Westchester, PA. Go check them out in person, first and foremost. But also, I mean, it's a restaurant as well. They have very good food.
Yes.
Brandon likes the jalapeno poppers there.
Right.
Our buddy Rich Bobby said the wings are delicious there. Mm-hmm. But they have all kinds of great beers on tap that they brew right there. Check it. They also have packaged goods, of course, that you can buy there or wherever you buy your beer. If you go to buy beer wherever you buy your beer and they don't have Wrong Crowd, I mean, first of all, maybe just don't go there anymore. But also tell them, yo, you're missing out. You don't have Wrong Crowd beer. Get it in here and I will buy it and I will drink it up as long as I'm 21 years old. And Brandon is now holding up their signature brand, the Quarterback Factory, with a quarterback, a nondescript quarterback.
So good.
Jersey number 1.
So good. Wearing number 1.
So as not to get sued.
I will say, Jimmy, I feel like the Quarterback Factory is just very approachable. It's an approachable beer. It's like if you're going the Wrong Crowd, maybe you're not like a beer expert or a big beer connoisseur or whatever, and like you don't know what to get, I would say I'd recommend this is a good one if you don't know what to get to start out with. So check out the Quarterback Factory from the Wrong Crowd. My
favorite still, I think, is the Boser Bub.
Yes.
But anyway, Brandon, what do you say you and I just kind of go back and forth on our takeaways from Nick and Howie's
We do love a back and forth like we do in training camp. We'll do it here too.
It's kind of become the staple of what
All right, so my biggest thing.
It's an easy format to kind of execute in podcast.
Right. It's fair. We're teaching young children how to, take your turn, give everyone a turn. Anyway, my biggest takeaway from the Howie, Nick, Sirianni joint press conferences at the Combine, and you wrote an article about this, but it also just very much stood out to me in the moment when I heard Howie Roseman go up first, which is worth mentioning because the order of this matters. And he's asked, was it by you about that, or was that by
I think it was.
Bo?
I think Bo asked that. To Howie.
Bo Wolf asked about kind of needing to play young players more, or the the challenge of that or whatever, kind of weighing that. And naturally, a general manager should be more invested in the future and the young players when he's making these draft picks, and he has to plan for the future, and ideally would like to see his draft picks be part of that plan. So, but I wasn't surprised that Howie Roseman was talking about how yes, they need to play the young players at some level, but he specifically mentioned that he talked to Nick Sirianni about needing to do this more. And then Nick Sirianni gets up there at the podium and he's asked about the same kind of thing.
That one I asked by you.
Nick. Yeah. And Nick Sirianni didn't really agree. Or at least he was like, I have to play, whoever helps us win on Sundays. And I get that thinking from a standpoint of that is literally the coach's job. But clearly, I think you also have to consider it's not just about winning that week. It's ultimately about winning the Super Bowl. And how do you get better over the course of a year, even, or multiple years, and you have to give young players opportunity. You don't just hand a young player the opportunity for the sake of playing them if they stink, because the veterans can see that that might not be the most prudent move. Like it's not Madden. Like I always say, there are like there's human elements and whatnot. There's variables, but it's weird to me that Howie would go up there and say that they talked about it, and then Sirianni acted like they never talked about it.
Right. And Sirianni's like right behind the stage too. So he hears everything that's being asked, and when Howie's up there, and everything that, all of Howie's answers, of course. So he heard Howie's answer. And then even though he got that, 10 minutes later, he was like, yeah, we're just going to play the guys that give us the best chance to play on that given day.
Yeah. Didn't even like
give us the best chance to win rather on that given day.
Didn't even entertain. Like, yeah, maybe that's something we need to evaluate. Maybe that's something we could do
Right.
better of balancing it. Again, I'm not saying he needs to play all the young players just for the sake of doing it, and you just draft someone and you instantly put them in the starting lineup. That's what no one's saying that, but they're saying like there are obviously times, especially at different positions like edge rusher and Nolan Smith last year,
Right,
where you could have done a better job at like upping their, especially with the ridiculous amount of snaps that Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat were playing. Like, how could you not find a better time to mix them in? And maybe you do that, and at the end of the season, Nolan Smith is a lot better, and you can trust him to play a lot more. And then you can trust him a lot to play more this year when you might not even have Hassan Reddick back. We'll see. So that I do again think that is not unique to Nick Sirianni, to be fair, because I think this was a big conversation at the end of the Doug Peterson era, where it was like Doug doesn't want to play the young guys, and a lot of people were frustrated with that. And I felt like there was this narrative at the time that Nick Sirianni like would do that, and he's a teacher, and the player development would be really big. And not to say that hasn't happened at all, but I think it's just interesting to me that like some of the same issues there are popping up with a different coaching regime. So, but I think Howie's right. Like Howie has, like, they have to get young players on the field more, especially because of where they are in certain spots on the roster now. Like, I think they're not going to have a choice at some spots, depending on how free agency everything shakes out and re-signings and whatnot. But some of those spots, they literally potentially at defensive tackle, and we'll see what happens with Fletcher Cox. But like, you drafted Jordan Davis, obviously high. Same thing with Jalen Carter. Like they and the tone at the end of the locker room cleanout day, Jordan Davis seemed to think that Fletcher Cox is not going to be back, and he's going to have to step up in a big role. So yeah, I mean, I do think they have to play these young guys more and develop them. And I think I brought it up, was it last episode, where I was like, the Chiefs defense got a lot better from 2022 to 2023 because they actually played the young guys, and they kind of took their lumps in 2022. And all of a sudden they were a lot better. They're much improved, and they're better players this past season.
There was a 4-game stretch during the season, week 8 to week 12. They had a bye mixed in there too, but Commanders, Cowboys, Chiefs, Bills, where the defense played and like they were playing a crazy number of snaps in every game. The Bills game, especially, I think they were up over 90. I want to say.
Well, it went to overtime.
Yeah, and both Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat played over 80 snaps each, which is a crazy number for an edge rusher. And Nolan Smith, I forget how many exactly he played in that game. I want to say he played like 11 snaps in that game, which is just, it's far too low. And you look at like, even forget like the idea of a player, playing a player early in the season so that they can, and I'll get to that in a minute, but so that they can, be competent role players late in the season and into the playoffs when you need them. That was a situation where they just needed to give their stars a little bit of a break here and there. And as we saw down the stretch, those guys had nothing at the end of the year. Like Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat combined for 0 sacks in the final 4 games of the season. Josh Sweat didn't have a sack from the bye on. Chiefs, Bills, 49ers, Cowboys, Seahawks, Giants, Cardinals, Giants. All those games, no sacks. Finally got one in the playoffs. But it seemed pretty clear to me like those guys got tired out during the course of the season, and they could have played if they had played Nolan Smith a little bit more, so that he could get playing time, get his NFL sea legs under him, and maybe become a productive player down the stretch, but B, also just to preserve guys like Reddick and Sweat, and to a lesser degree Brandon Graham, who obviously is getting up there in age. So that was sort of he averaged, I think, 7 point something snaps per game. Nolan Smith, first round pick. Like, it's just, and you understand, of course, that when they took him in the draft, that he probably wasn't going to play a huge role on defense because he was behind those three guys, all of whom had double-digit sacks in 2022. So you took him with the understanding that he wasn't going to have a huge role, but they still going to mix him in a little bit. And then you have other guys like Tyler Steen, who's not like Sua Opeta is starting games over here. Come on. Okay. Yeah. Does he help you? Does he give you, is he probably a slightly better player than him early in the year when you needed somebody to start for Cam Jurgens? Yeah. Is the difference so big that you're going to play a guy that's not in your long-term plans over a guy that you took at 65th overall, almost a second round pick?
A guy who you cut the year prior. They cut Suapeta late in the 2022 season.
Right. You're going to play him over again, like a guy who was almost a second round pick. Sidney Brown. You got guys like Terrell Edmonds and Justin Evans playing over him early in the season. He only played like 300 something snaps. And then when he finally did get to play, it was out of position, because Avonte Maddox and Zach McPherson, of course, got hurt. And then Josiah Scott stunk. Mario Goodrich stunk. So they couldn't trust us to put Sidney Brown in that situation. And even then he showed promise, but he didn't even get to play his real position for the majority of his snaps during his rookie season. And, you could see that he has talent, and you wonder what might he have been if they just let him play from day one. And, there was the fear, I guess, with him that, he's so over aggressive that, maybe opposing offenses take advantage of that. Well, so what? I mean, their pass defense sucked all year anyway. You may as well have a guy that's taking chances and maybe makes a huge play like you did against the Cardinals, by the way. I mean, that was sort of a, bad play by the Cardinals, but you had the 99-yard interception return.
I mean, the pick was
the return
a gift,
was awesome.
But the return was skill.
Keely Ringo, one snap played in the regular. He was a core special teamer, but he played one snap in the regular defense the first 12 games of the season. Again, you have guys like Josiah Scott playing, and Josiah Scott's a slot corner, fine, but you have guys like him playing, Mario Goodrich. They did have Bradbury move into the slot a little bit, maybe and he was fine there early in the season. Maybe you have Bradbury play in the slot and Keely Ringo play on the outside. Just give him a chance to play a little bit in some way. And then this even goes back to last year. Nakobe Dean played 43 snaps in 2022 as a rookie. And then I think we kind of saw he wasn't ready to go in 2020. He couldn't, was Kaiser White so irreplaceable in the lineup that you couldn't just mix in Kobe Dean for a series here and there in 2022? Or
especially given how they rotated linebackers last year. They were rotating linebackers left and right throughout the season.
So many blowouts last year too, where you couldn't get him in. Once you got a 2 or 3 score lead, get him in because he's going to be part of your future. You're probably going to lose linebackers. Get him some playing time, get his sea legs wet, and he's probably more prepared to go in 2023 if he got more playing time last year. So really interesting that it's an answer that you'd expect of a GM. I'm surprised Howie was that open about it. And then for Nick to be like, nah.
Right. Again, he said he talked about
it. He just survived a firing too.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of an interesting tone, though, to the Nick Sirianni's entire press conference, because I thought it was a much different tone than we heard from him the last time he spoke.
Yes.
At the end of season, the post-mortem, we were waiting for a press conference to finally be announced if he would be actually back or not. This combine press conference was a little bit more of defiance, I thought, from him.
Yeah, very hat in hand, in the in the end of season press conference, conciliatory, is that the word I'm looking for? But very, very humble. And then in this one, and man, well, let's just move on to the next thing.
Sure.
Which for me is, man, stop it with the core values already. Certainly the fan base does not give a shit about any of that. And he said core values, and he rattled off the core values 3 or 4 different times during his press conference. Enough, man. After one press conference, it was ringing hollow. It was like I was tired of it. And if that's what the players are hearing every single day, the message kind of gets tired after a while. You gotta, come up. I mean, just to hear that over and over and over again, it I don't know. And also the fan base doesn't want to hear any about that. anything like that after the season that they just had. Interestingly, like, and we'll talk more about the NFLPA, I guess, sort of like survey that they put out every year where they rank teams in terms of player comfort level, I guess is the way I'd put it, in terms of like travel, facilities, treatment of family, coaching staff, etc. And Nick did really well in that category. He got an A from his players. And I get that. Like, he's a player's coach and training camp is easy. And their practice schedule during the week is easy. So the players obviously like him. He's a player's coach.
Well, to some extent, yeah. I don't hate him.
But man, you just kept bringing up the core values over and over again. And like, come on, man. So let's talk about what happened during the season. Talk about what happened during the season. What, like, you got to ask questions like, what went wrong? You had a chance to look at the tape from, the end of the season. What happened? What was the downfall of the team? And he didn't answer those questions. He just went like right back to core values. And like, nobody wants to hear that. You kind of owe the fan base an explanation on why everything went so badly during the 2023 season and what you're going to do to fix it. Nobody don't. It even said, like, we're going to triple down on our core values.
I want to read that whole quote. I want to read that because you have it typed out. But first, quick on like the players liking Sirianni. And I don't think anyone has ever said otherwise. No one has been like, the players, do they hate Sirianni?
Yeah.
That's not been the question. The question is Nick Sirianni doing his job effectively? Like, is the messaging and everything, is that really truly getting through? Is he effective at his job? That's the bigger question.
Right.
And that I've seen some like weird kind of gotcha because of those survey results that like, okay, so I'm just ignoring the last, like, this means more to me than the last 7 games that we saw when they got blown out by the Bucs 32-9. Like that, this survey is like, well, see, they were right to keep Sirianni. Like, no, like that's not, that doesn't convince me. Maybe they will be, but like that, I don't care about the survey in that regard so much. I mean, I guess it's nice to see they like him, but that doesn't mean he's good at his job just because the players like him. Anyway, yeah, so you wrote this at the end. I thought you did this, you handled this well in terms of how you presented it in your article on phillyvoice.com. You have in bold here, what's one thing Sirianni learned last year that he can apply going forward to prevent a loss or two from becoming an even more disastrous slide? And
great question. I forget who asked that, but that was a very good question, whoever asked that.
And now I'll get into it. But first of all, yeah, on the core values thing, it's just like, I feel like he talks about them. They're like the 10 commandments. Like they're just like this like divine thing that somehow is just like
he's holding like the 2 tablets out in the desert.
Or like canonical, you know what I mean? It's just like, you just made these. I'm not saying there's no merit to them, but like you're talking about these things like they're just like this like heaven sent thing, as opposed to something you made up. And it's like, it's like I'm beholden to this. Like it's so weird to me. Anyway, here's the answer. We went through early here in 2021. We went through a really tough stretch, right? And we doubled down on the things we knew to be true, our culture, our core values. And then we went through a tough stretch here too. Even though we said to ourselves, hey, we're doubling down on this in 2021, it worked. In 2023, it didn't work. I think it's, again, being in this constant growth mindset of things that just always trying to get better at every style of football that you're trying to do. I do think, though, with those core values, you always double down on those because to me, it wasn't the core values. We didn't just make them up and say connect, compete, accountability, football IQ, and fundamentals are what's important. That was years and years of coaching and playing that we thought to ourselves. And I thought to myself, these are the common denominators of good football teams. That's not changing off a bad spurt, right? So it is a true double down on those from day one, doubling down on connection, doubling down on the accountability. I really look at those two, the connect and the accountability, even though I say connect, compete, those 2 C's kind of go together, so they stay together. But connection and accountability are the 2, I would say, cornerstones of our program. That those are the ones that when I really take away, hey, these are important, that we play with good football IQ, that we play with good fundamentals, and that we compete our ass off. Those are important, but everything starts with the accountability and connecting. So it's almost a double down and triple down on those core values, and I look forward to when the players get back to do that. And then you have in your like takeaway from that answer, just oof. Yeah, because it's just I'm laughing during saying because it sounds ridiculous. And like this idea, like the thing where the alliterative part comes into it, like connect and compete, begin with C, so that like matters. It's just I just don't. I'm not trying to say Nick Sirianni is a buffoon just because he has answers like this. And, we've seen him have success. And everyone made fun of his, obviously likes to point out, they made fun of his initial press conference, how they made fun of the Flowers press conference. This isn't the only thing that matters. But, I mean, be real. Like, do I look at this and be like, this is a good vibe? This inspires confidence in me. No, it doesn't. I can't say it does.
Yeah, I mean, it's all fair. And, that was a very rambly answer. He does that a lot. And he doesn't do himself any favors when he does kind of ramble about, that kind of thing. But even after as you said, he's had a lot of success. And even after the epic collapse, his record overall is still pretty stellar. Like it's still one of the better records in NFL history. So, I think they have a chance to turn it around in 2024. But I think your broader point too, that his tone overall was kind of defiant in comparison to what we saw of him, the last time, we got the media talk to him immediately after the season was over.
My next point on that would be another transition point would be like the talk about, I think the two biggest things in the press conference were really what I said first.
Yeah.
And the divide on playing young players, and then what the offense is going to look like next year in terms of what the Kellen Moore hire means, because the tone changed from, and I counted the amount of times that Nick Sirianni said fresh ideas and new ideas in his post-mortem presser.
And it was over and over again. It was like half a dozen at least, right?
It was 8 times. It was 4 times each. I went back and looked at that like a while ago. There was a lot of that. And then that's not what you heard this time. That is not what he said. That was not the messaging in this press conference. It was all about meshing the concepts of what they did, which he did touch on in the past. He definitely did say in the end of season press conference, like, we're not, basically, not so many words, we're not going to scrap the playbook that we have and start from ground zero here and reinvent the wheel. That's not what he said. He said, we have done some good things, so we definitely want to incorporate that. But it seemed to be more about like, this idea of meshing Kellen Moore and what he wants to bring into their current structure. And I'm not saying it's definitely going to work out in the Rich Scangarello mode of 2020 where the Eagles, had too many cooks in the kitchen. But I think that's like a fair thing to wonder about or be concerned about, like how exactly does this mesh together? It's possible that it does great. And Johnny Page has had some great analysis of that he did a 3-part series on Kellen Moore and bleedinggreennation.com. So there's definitely, and he highlighted some specific examples of why he thinks Kellen Moore will fit with Nick Sirianni. So it's possible that they do mesh together great. But, again, having seen it work out in the past where the head coach, like in this case, like Doug Peterson obviously had his ideas and I don't think was super keen on just like doing whatever Rich Scangarello wanted to do when he came to town. I think it's a fair thing to wonder about. So, and especially again, when the tone was different this time, where it was more about like, well, we like what we do, but we're going to fit this in as well.
Okay. I guess my last takeaway was, Howie was asked what, the Eagles intend on doing to upgrade the defense during the offseason. Of course, he's not going to give like the blueprint of like, what positions they're going to target, what players they're going to target, where they want to spend at this position, that position, etc. But he did note basically that, and we're talking about the defensive side of the ball again here, like, and I'll just read what he said. I don't think there's an area that we wouldn't be open to addressing. Now, if you look at our defense and you're just kind of honest with it, we have a lot of young players at defensive tackle. Is that as big a priority as other areas? Just being honest, probably not. But that's also an important position. So we're also not going to be in a position where we turn a guy down because the resources are already there because we believe in the D-line so much and blah, 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 blah. So I think what he's basically saying there. And I'll also talk about sort of, what I kind of gathered in my time in Indy over the last week, these press conferences aside. But I think after we come back after the break. But I think it's just kind of common sense is what he's talking about there, where they drafted Jalen Carter last year. They drafted Jordan Davis. They drafted Milton Williams the year before that. They have other younger guys like Moro Ojomo, who they drafted last year. They have Marlon Tuipulotu, who they drafted a few years ago. And then, of course, Fletcher Cox was sort of the old head among that group last season. So, yeah, probably not going to address that position. Everything else, probably on the table. Edge rusher, maybe more so in the draft than in free agency. I mean, if they trade Hassan Reddick, then, maybe you're looking at a guy like a Van Ginkel from Miami who played under Vic Fangio. We'll see what happens with Reddick. Reddick was talked about during the press conference too. I don't know if there's anything new on him, and we'll get to Reddick in a little bit anyway when we do a little stay or go defense later in the pod. So let's not get bogged down by that right now. But I think when you look at the linebacker position and you look at the safety position, and I mean cornerback too, I guess is a possibility as well. Those are going to be the areas of focus in free agency, in my very strong opinion. And again, I'll talk more about that when we come back from the break. But certainly those are positions where they are weak right now. Like obvious roster holes at those positions right now, and they're going to have to address that in free agency before they get to the draft, so that they're not reaching for guys in the early rounds and winding up with a Danny Watkins, Jaquan Jarrett situation. So yeah, anyway, I don't know if you have anything to add to what he said there.
Not so much, other than you just brought up the Danny Watkins thing, and it's like it's hard to see Latu mention that he wants to be a firefighter in the future, and is like taking some courses and be like, and by all accounts, from what I've heard and like limited time of watching him, he seems like a pretty cool player and a nice player, but like it's just like you hear that and you're like, really? Like,
and he played for Chip too, which is another
just like Danny Watkins did.
I wouldn't call it a red flag, but just funny.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's just like there's some of the vibes there are like traumatic. Anyway, yeah, I don't have much to add. So are you good on that end? We'll take a break.
Yeah,
here.
I mean, we'll come back after the break and I'll talk more about like on that note, basically what I gathered from what they'll attack in free agency.
Well, let's take a break here. We will be back after this. Back here on BGN Radio, which in addition to Wrong Crowd Beer Company is also brought to you, Jimmy, by Righteous Felon Craft Jerky. You can go to righteousfelon.com.
Look at that on the Cryon.
and
use or whatever it's called.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, the ticker. Discount code BGN15 at 15 or at righteousfelon.com for 15% off your order. I have here in hand, as you can see on the video, again on the Winning Green Nation YouTube channel.
The fiery. By the way, the heat on the ones that advertise they have heat. I mean,
it's legit.
Be careful.
Well, it's good though. It's not like
no. I know. I'm saying, if you like heat, they pack some heat.
They bring the heat. I do like the fact though that it's also I hate when products in general do heat for the sake of heat and like the flavor isn't there to balance it. It's just make you suffer. Not the case here. These have a really good flavor. 9 grams of protein, Jimmy. That's for the people who are working out and whatnot.
Treat.
Yeah. It's also gluten-free, soy-free, only 1 gram of sugar in here. So, a pretty good deal. I'm actually hungry, so I'm gonna eat this right now. But you can, or actually really when I'm done talking, but you can get this at righteousfelon.com when you use discount code BGN15 for 15% off your order. Same discount code works at wildrangerpet.com for 15% off dog treats. Okay, Jimmy, why don't you tell me what you kind of heard at the combine so I can snack on this Righteous Felon craft jerky meat stick?
Well, I think when you look at what they did last year in free agency, it was survive, basically. I mean, they're definitely going to lose a bunch of players, and obviously they wound up losing both their starting linebackers in TJ Edwards and Kaiser White. They lost both of their starting safeties in Marcus Epps and CJ GJ. Retained maybe the wrong players like James Bradbury, maybe to a lesser degree, Darius Slay. And then what I think you saw them do otherwise was just sign a bunch of guys to 1-year contracts. Some of them older, some of them, mid to late 20s, but 1-year contract guys like Justin Evans, as I mentioned before, Terrell Edmonds, linebacker Nicholas Morrow, and then later, into training camp like Miles Jack and Zach Cunningham and Contavious Street along the defensive line, all 1-year deals. I don't think you're going to see that this year. So they may sign some guys to 1-year deals to fill just, depth or roster spots. If that's just what they can get done, it's 1-year deals. But I think the initial plan heading into free agency will be more targeting guys in their prime, guys like, coming off their rookie contract that are 25, 26, some cases like 27 years old, but guys that are, kind of proven players already. And I think they want to sign those kinds of guys to multi-year deals. Now, they haven't done that in a while at, I guess, linebacker and safety. Like even Kaiser White was a 1-year deal, but at safety, they haven't done it since Rodney McLeod in 2016. And that worked out. Like Rodney McLeod was a good player for the Eagles for a while. And in 2021, they targeted heavily Marcus Williams, who signed with, was it the Saints? Or no, he came from the Saints, signed with the Ravens. Justin Reed was another one he signed with Kansas City. I'm missing one in there. I think it was actually a couple other guys, but they whiffed on all of them. Like they just, the teams that those guys signed with were probably swayed. Those teams were better than the Eagles at the time. And they also, I believe the money was a little bit better, but also even, I believe, in some cases, but they chose those teams over the Eagles. Anyway, they tried in 20. The point is they tried to sign, a top of the market safety. So the idea that they won't do that at that position, I believe is incorrect. I think they will do it. They've had success. They had success with it in 2016. They tried in 2021, failed, whatever. I think they're going to try again this offseason. And then at linebacker, I think you could see them. And sorry, let me go back to safety for a second. The safety free agent market is strong this year because you got guys like, my personal favorite is Kyle Duggar from the Patriots. I think he's a really good player. Also gives you some versatility to kind of play like a safety / linebacker hybrid role. Xavier McKinney is another one. Guy I like out of Indy, Justin Blackman. Has had injury issues, but when he's played, he's been really good. Who am I missing here?
I mean, Anton Winfield, I guess.
Oh yeah, he's probably gonna get tagged, but he's awesome. Like phenomenal player.
I'm looking up the rest of the list because I'm blanking too. But Eddie Jackson's still out there. Not that that's a big name, but like, okay, there's someone.
He'd be more of like the 1-year. I think that's I think that's the kind of player that they're seeking to. They could very well sign Eddie Jackson. Like who knows? I mean,
you're not rushing to do it.
Yeah, he played for Vic Fangio, so there's maybe some comfort level there. But I think the theme will be to, like, if they do sign a guy like him, maybe a little later, like week 2 or something in free agent. Maybe, I don't know, they could sign him right away. Who knows? But like, I think their priority is to sign guys not like him, like more, like I said before, like guys coming off their rookie contract that can be part of your plans for multiple years, as opposed to a 1-year band-aid on a guy that is clearly like on the downside of his career. They're looking for guys like either in their prime or on the upshoot, than guys like Eddie Jackson, who, clearly their best days are behind them. Again, they could just bring him in so that to help Vic Fangio kind of get his defense get underway or whatever, as a secondary kind of signing. Secondary,
pun intended.
By secondary, I mean not primary.
A fallback. I think he's a fallback guy, especially because, like, you could potentially pair that with, okay, we like Sidney Brown a lot, but he's not obviously going to be healthy right away necessarily. So, you might sign Eddie Jackson with the hope that, Sidney kind of overtakes him later in the year once he gets healthier, something like that.
Right. I think when you look at the safety position too, you have 2 young guys there that you hope will be your long-term starters in Reed Blankenship and Sidney Brown. But I don't think you can count on that. Like, Reed played well when he filled in at the end of the year last year. This year, I thought he played a lot better in the first half of the year than he did. And I thought he was actually kind of bad in the second half of the year. And then, of course, Sidney Brown, we already touched on him earlier, where he probably didn't get as many opportunities as he should have, but he tore his ACL in the final regular season game of the season. and his availability for week 1 will be in question. So I don't think you can just count on those guys being your like definitive answers for the foreseeable future. Go get a guy that is definitely going to be good. And then, hey, if Reed Blankenship turns out to be really good and Sidney Brown turns out to be really good, and then you also have this other free agent who is very good. Okay, that's kind of a good problem to have 3 safeties, and especially for a guy like Duggar, just as an example that I threw out. Like, if he has like that safety linebacker kind of versatility, then you can do something with him in that role too. Jeremy Chin is a guy that they looked at during this season. During 2023 at the trade deadline. I'd heard from multiple people that they had interest in trading for him, and then he got hurt, so that took him off the table. Like, he was going to be out for like a month and a half to 2 months. I think it was a shoulder injury. So that's another guy that could be on the radar. He's not as good as like a Kyle. Him and Kyle Duggar are very similar players. I think Duggar's way better than Jeremy Chin. So that'd be kind of disappointing in my opinion if they went after a guy like Jeremy. Like, that was their big safety signing. But I guess the point that I was trying to make, I guess, in safety and linebacker was the safety market is a lot stronger than the linebacker market. But I think they're going to try to spend at both, and they've kind of spent at linebacker before. Like, they've taken second round linebackers in the past, and they spent, I mean,
they spent $6 million on Kaiser.
Yeah, and they spent.
Sure enough, that was their best signing when they actually spent like real resources.
Yes. And Nigel Bradham is another one that they spent moderate money on.
True.
And then they re-signed him to a much bigger deal later down the line. So, yeah, I mean, I think they're going to attack both of those positions early in free agency, but I think you're going to see them attack more of the top of the market at safety than linebacker. But I think they're going to try to sign like a legit starting linebacker and certainly a legit starting safety. But again, I think top of the market at safety. More so than linebacker.
I think it's a fair way to frame it. I think they're more interested in pushing the ceiling at safety as much as they're trying to more raise the floor at linebacker. If you like that framing at all.
I think that's very well said. Yes.
All right.
And thanks. Cornerback is a possibility too. Like, like I don't know if they're going to trade for L'Jarius Sneed or anything like that, but
honestly, they're not going to do that.
I mean, it's possible. But like,
it's not impossible, but I'm going to say it's very unlikely.
Agreed. But I do think that like if there is a corner that they just really like, not out of the question that they'll go attack that position because they value it. I mean, when you look at like sort of the Andy Reid style of roster building, which Howie Roseman adopted and has been, an Eagles staple over the years. Quarterback, it's obviously at the top of the pyramid. Line play, thereafter focus on offensive line, defensive line, of course, right there with it. Wide receiver, cornerback, and then a big drop off to everything else. So, but I think cornerback is sort of one of those next tier kind of positions that they will address, that they will attack aggressively if they really like a player and think that that guy can make an impact for them. So I wouldn't totally dismiss that. And again, like we mentioned earlier, they have more cap space than they maybe envisioned. I don't remember if we mentioned that during this podcast.
We touched on that last week. I kind of downplayed it just from a standpoint, like I don't think it's revolutionary. It does help. I don't deny that it helps. I just don't think, it changes. It's not like, oh man, this changes everything. It does help them.
I do know, sorry to cut you off. I do know that like it went up more than all the other teams around the league were anticipating. So it does give them a little added bump that they weren't expecting.
Sure. But again,
and like I mentioned in the last podcast, like I think it helps a team, but I think it helps the teams that are a little tighter against the cap than it does the teams that are, 70, 80 million under the cap already.
Yeah. Well, like the Commanders who have the most cap space in the NFL, it doesn't help.
It does nothing for them. Yeah. That little extra cap space does nothing.
Levels the playing field a bit. But again, other teams also benefit from that. So I think a good thing for sure, ultimately, but not like, again, this life-changing thing. Helpful. By the way, that fiery habanero right to selling meat stick had me tempted to reach for the water at first, but then I was going like this, like, whoo, it was hot, but it passed. And
okay,
it's a nice
You're
little
a football
burn.
guy. You toughed it out.
Yeah, I toughed it out, and it was good. Anyway, anything else from
no, that was kind of the big thing. I think was I think that that they're not just going to sit back and sign a bunch of 1-year guys, and even on, I mentioned like the 6 or 7 guys on defense. I mean, even on offense, they just signed a bunch of guys to 1-year contracts, like
OZ.
Rashad Penny and like Olamide Zacchaeus, and then into the season, of course, Julio Jones, Marcus Mariota was another one. So I mean, that was their strategy last year, which they kind of had to do that because they were so tight against the cap, and they already had lost a lot of guys, that important, role players, both on offense and defense. And that's what they were restricted to, but they'll have more flexibility this year to actually go out and add a player from the outside that can be a starter or an impact player.
Yeah, it was more about lottery tickets last year and hoping that at least one would kind of hit.
Greedy Williams. Remember that one?
I forgot about that. Yeah. Wow. And he was bad. I don't think any of them did hit, right? Fair to say, like none of them really.
Yeah, I think they all kind of. Yeah, I mean,
rank
none of them over. Maybe, I mean, like the best one probably would be Justin Evans because he won a starting job.
I would say Zach Cunningham. I think Zach Cunningham played pretty well for what you signed him to. Like that's
yes, but that wasn't even during free agency. That was like during training camp that they finally brought him in. But yeah, as far as like the free agent
initial group
lottery tickets, they all busted.
Yeah, didn't get like anything really, which that's part of the reality. Sometimes
maybe a little bit.
I mean, I liked OZ, but they just didn't. I think the bigger issue there is they didn't give him enough chances reasonably.
Yeah, agreed.
But whatever. In any case, didn't work out. But yeah, I thought he wasn't bad, but he was fine. But certainly, it sounds like you're saying they want to do more than that this season. And and to their credit, they still have done some of that with like the Julian Okwara and the Tyrion Davis Price signing. Like they're still like looking for that lottery ticket thing, but they're doing it in a way where it's a little bit more like less to lose because it's just total.
Those are just futures contracts.
Yeah, back end of the 90-man roster kind of deal, which might be a more better place to do that as opposed to some of the top free agent signings you make. So, okay, just real quick on the NFLPA report card. You can check that out online. We have some coverage of that at bleedinggreennation.com. I know anything too revelatory about it. I think you had some good insight on that.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't take a hard look at what I know the Eagles finished 4th, I think it was, in the NFL on the player report cards. And I know that like the areas that that players felt there was needed improvement, like the easy things that they could address, they did. Like, for example, they didn't have, like, one of the things mentioned last year was players didn't get to sit in first class. And what the Eagles did instead was just take 2 planes on the road with them this past year. And then that way players could have their own row, because they didn't want to have some players sit in first class and make them feel, make the players that don't get to sit in first class feel like
that.
Exactly. Like they're lesser people, lesser players than the people that get to sit in first class. I get that. So what they did was they just took 2 planes and allowed the players to kind of stretch out. And actually they kind of felt like having your own row was actually better than sitting in first class next to somebody anyway.
How do you feel about that as I mean, you would probably want first class, I feel like, but I do I'll say as a person who's 6'9", like as someone who's really big, it really is nice when you do have your own row. I will say that.
Yeah, I think you can make an argument for either. I take my own row, I think, over first class. And like, so first class, you get added amenities, like you're getting free drinks up there and you're getting more attention from, do you want gummy bears? Do you need another drink, sir? Mm-hmm. Would you like some Chips Ahoy? But that's probably going on in the whole plane. Like there's no class system on the plane. Like if Fletcher Cox is sitting in first class, you're not just offering him gummy bears, but not Milton Williams back in coach. So it's not like you get the added amenities sitting in first class that you wouldn't get on a team plane anyway, going from Philly to Seattle or wherever you're going. So I'd probably rather have my own row if all things being equal. If I'm getting a little added attention, like free drinks and stuff like that, then yeah, I'll probably take first class.
Right. But space-wise, yeah, it's nice. I think it is, again, as a person who is sometimes crammed into smaller seating as a large person, not the most fun thing.
They added a family room,
Yep.
evidently, to Lincoln Financial Field last year, which was a complaint, I guess, the prior year. They don't have roommates on the road. A lot of teams have that garbage. Like I couldn't even imagine being an NFL player and I got a room with somebody. Like I wouldn't even want to do that as a reporter. So
Sure.
that's a nice benefit. But yeah, I mean, it seems like the Eagles as an organization. I mean, so they took the feedback that they got from a year ago, and all the things that were easy to fix, they did it. They listened to the feedback and they fixed it. So
yeah.
I think organizationally, they're very good at that kind of stuff.
I agree. Yeah, that's never been called into question. There was also some feedback in there. They need to renovate the locker room or kind of update that.
The locker room sucks.
Yeah, and that's fair.
It's small. They just don't have a lot of space in there.
That's the issue for sure. And I know there's talk about there's restrictions in terms of their actual physical space at the NovaCare complex. It's not like this huge parcel of land where they can just expand wherever they want. Like they're working with a space limitations there, but yeah, I think that's a fair complaint. And look, no team is going to be batting 1,000. Like there's always any work environment in any field, there's always going to be complaints, and fairly so, from employees. And to your point, I think the Eagles have done well to address some of the things. And at the same time, how much of this matters? I think again, more than none at all. But it's funny to see the Chiefs down there towards the bottom of the rankings.
Yeah.
And one of the worst owners when they're winning back-to-back Super Bowls. So it's nice. I think it helps. It's a positive, but it also hardly means everything. But
Commanders
it is funny too.
Dead last again.
I was going to say to see them dead last, and that's also. I think that speaks to your point that you bring up a lot. Like the stench of Dan Snyder is not just something that goes away overnight.
Right.
That stench remains there, and I'm sure Josh Harris is planning to fix some of that stuff. I don't doubt that. He's going to spend money and renovate some of that stuff, but that takes time.
Yeah, I mean, it all really in that. It's not just that kind of stuff. Better, attention to families, better planes, better locker room, better facilities, etc. And they will get a new stadium eventually. Probably not going to happen for 7, 8, 9 years. I think people think that's going to happen a lot quicker than it is. My understanding from people that cover that team is it's not going to take, it's going to take a while. But then also there's other things football wise that take a long time, like analytics, for example. Josh Harris wants to bring analytics to the Commander. Well, guess what? The Eagles are thought of as a very analytical team. They've developed that part of their franchise for 2 decades now. So the idea that you just we have analytics now, it's just a box to check. That's not how it works. So you got to get really good at figuring out what matters, what doesn't, how you implement it into games, into draft strategy, into game planning, into just varying various coaching thing, whatever. There's just the idea that we didn't have analytics before, but now we have it. We're equal to the other teams that have analytics. Nope, not how it works.
Well,
so it's going to take a long time for them to fix the damage and they didn't move up a spot. So the idea that Josh Harris is going to come in and just overhaul everything, that didn't even happen. It doesn't seem like they even did a lot to fix what was wrong there.
I think that's, and I don't want to defend Josh Harris here, but I think that's kind of what he did at the Sixers too at first. I think his style was he didn't change much at first, kind of kept things going, evaluated, and then made big sweeping changes. Okay. So I think that's kind of what's going to be coming for the Commanders here anyway. But again, yeah, I think it's going to take time. So we'll see how that goes for them. Why don't we take another break here, Jimmy? And then we will talk about some Eagles stay or go. We will be
back after this.
Back here on BGN Radio. Jimmy, if you're looking to buy, sell, or rent a house, you can contact Kristen Roach at 856-906-9295. That's correct, right? That's the right number?
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
I have it.
Did you finally remember that?
Well, I looked it up on Google, and then
Oh,
because
okay.
I wanted to put it for the banner here at the bottom of the screen, so that way people can just look at it right there and decide to contact her if they're looking to buy, sell, or rent a house, or do the home evaluation thing, right?
Yeah, so like if you're looking to, if like you just want to have an idea of what your house could sell for, if you're considering putting it on the market, she can give you a market analysis of your home free
Right.
of charge. She'll just take a look at home comps in the area, homes that sold over the last 2 years or whatever, and give you an idea of what it would sell for. Spring is typically the time that the market kind of sees an influx of homes on the market because people like to, I don't know, that seems to be the time when people like to buy new houses is in the spring and leading into the summer or whatever. So yeah, call her up, text her 856-906-9295. She can do that for you.
Okay, let's get into Eagles stay or go, Jimmy. I have, I think, 10 or 11 players listed here.
Okay.
Let's just go through them all. Let's start with Brandon Lee Graham. Stay or go.
BLG2
Mhm.
is I think he's going to be back. And last year he made $5 million, I think it was, on a 1-year deal. He's not going to make that again this year.
Yeah, he was coming
But
off
I
a
think the
double-digit
value
sack
to
season.
him, what's that?
He was coming off a double-digit sack season, his
Right.
first one ever.
Yeah. So he said he wanted to come back for another year, and specifically with the Eagles, and then that'll probably be it for him thereafter. But I think you bring him back, I don't know, $3 million, something like that. But his value to the team, or I'll put it like this: the team values his culture setting ability in the locker room as much as they do his play on the field. And he had a down year last year. What do you have? 3 sacks, I think.
I think he can still play a little bit, though. I don't think he's
Yeah. I mean, you
cooked.
can be a
I
role
think he
player.
can. Yeah,
Sure.
he can kind of give you, and like in the playoffs, he was one of the few players who I think had a good game in that Bucks game. Like he brought it, and late in the
He'll
season,
give you 20 snaps a game.
Yeah, and look, if there's ever going to be exception, to getting younger, or we can't just bring back old players. Honestly, if Brandon Graham wants to keep playing until he's 60 or something, I don't care. That guy won you the Super Bowl, made the biggest play in franchise history, great culture guy. It's not lifetime contract. I don't care. I don't care. That is the one exception to me. I don't want to hear oh, we can't bring Brandon Graham back. I don't think people are saying that, to be fair, but I think Brandon Graham deserves whatever he wants, and I think it's nice that he could get a farewell year. He's not it's not the level of Kobe Bryant or Derek Jeter, like that. But
Yeah.
I still think it's cool that he'll get a moment, a whole season, kind of the spotlight is on him a little bit, knowing that he'll walk away at the end of it. I love Brandon Graham. We both said that he's one of our favorite players, or our favorite player to cover and whatnot.
People
Person, yeah. So yeah, he absolutely should be back. And I don't think it's just about the culture thing. I think he can be a nice fourth whatever edge rusher in the rotation. So Brandon Graham stay for sure. We'll go on next here to Fletcher Cox.
I think he's gone. I do think it was interesting during Howie's presser that he said he'll give Jason Kelsey and Fletcher Cox whatever time they need to decide whether they want to come back, but they don't want to see them in other colors, is the way he put it, which I definitely can see that for Kelsey, but Fletch almost left last year. He was very close to signing with the Jets, and then he ultimately came back to the Eagles. I think he's going to be looking for other opportunities if he doesn't retire. By the way, I don't know if you saw, I forget who said this on WIP, but they were like, they got to give him a deadline of, we got to know in a week whether you're coming back or not, or you can go right to hell. You can go to hell, Jason Kelsey, if you don't tell us. They don't need it. They don't need to know. There's other years, maybe, but they have Jason Kelsey's backup plan in place. They have, as noted earlier, they have a ton of young defensive, interior defensive linemen. They don't it's not imperative that they need to know from these guys immediately. Would they like to know? Sure. Are you going to say, hey, screw you, guy who's been here for over a decade and gave your blood, sweat, and tears? We need to know right now.
I like the
whether
idea
you're coming back.
that Jason Kelsey's like watching that or comes across that and is like, "Oh no, I have to let him know."
Right. Wow, I'm a jerk. I should.
Anyway, this is tough because Fletcher Cox had I thought he had a really good year last year,
A good
especially
year.
relative to what I maintain. It would have been really nice to have that 2023 season in 2022. I know his numbers were better, at least like this, 7.5 sacks or whatever. But I've always said, like, name a play from that season that you remembered. And I said this last offseason.
Yeah.
There wasn't really much other than like the Carson Wentz, him sacking Carson Wentz early in the season. I don't really remember a ton that stood out. As opposed to last year, Fletcher made like a ton of key plays.
Yes.
And again, even going to the playoff game late in the season, like one of the few players who actually brought it and was still out there fighting hard. So it's almost tough for me to say, and like I don't get it from a standpoint, unless he just values his post-playing career so much that he could walk away. He's made a lot of money, but from a standpoint of his ability to make more money, I don't know why he would retire right now, because he could get at least one more good contract, I feel like, coming off the season that he just did.
For sure.
And
interior defensive linemen are valuable.
Yeah.
He'll get paid somewhere if he plays another year.
For sure. And so I have a tough time with that one. I don't think it's as obvious as just like, oh, he's going to walk away for sure, or you should definitely let him go because he gave you good value at defensive tackle last year. So I'm going to say stay. I think he comes. I think he comes back.
Okay, so we differ on that one.
Yeah.
But I thought like when Jordan Davis was talking so definitively about him being gone,
for sure.
I don't know if he let the cat out of the bag on that one. So like I haven't been able to get that out of my head, and maybe he doesn't know anything. Jordan Davis, for all we know, might not know anything, but maybe he does. I think
it's also different than the Kelsey situation, where I think Fletch is also this could be his last chance at making a lot of money. So if I think leverage is in play, and if he wants to get the best deal possible, he should act like he's not just definitely coming back to the Eagles. He should act like he is going to entertain other offers.
He completely cleaned out his locker empty.
Right.
So yeah, that if that's just negotiating tools, and his agent is kind of notorious for, I don't want to call him like the Scott Boras of the NFL. It's Todd France. It was also who else did an amazing job for Dak Prescott and hit the contract that he was able to get for the cat. Like, he's got a really good agent. So I mean, he's not a guy that's going to be taking a discount even if he comes back to Philly.
Yeah. So, and I think he is the kind of guy who would go where the money talks ultimately at this point, as opposed to Jason Kelsey, who's just either going to play for the Eagles or retire. So we disagree on that one. I think we're also going to disagree on this one. I think the idea, so, a lot of headlines were made when Howie was asked about James Bradbury and his future at the team. And he said he's under contract, so he's part of our plans. And you said something to the effect in your article about how well, I'll let you say it. How did you?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you hear the phrase "he's under contract," to me it means he's not going to be under contract much longer. Because you heard him gush about other players like Fletch and Kelsey, and there are others. Devontae, they asked about a contract extension for him, gushed over him, of course. And for him, Bradbury, it was just a 2-sentence reply. He's under contract. He's part of our plans. I don't think so. I mean, he was so bad last year that if you bring him back at his age and what he's going to give you otherwise, which is nothing, he's not going to play on special teams or anything like that, you're bringing him back to be a starter. And I just don't think they can do that with the way that he played last year, because you're going to have a 31-year-old backup who doesn't play special teams on your roster and take a roster spot away from a potentially younger developmental kind of guy. And I think it kind of depends on whether they think he's cooked or not.
Right.
And I kind of feel like they have to think he's cooked, right? So maybe they don't, and that's possible. But he's kind of one of those guys that hasn't been around long enough where they're super attached to him. I think he's a guy that, he's not a guy that Howie drafted. I know he's not a guy that we've seen him bring him back a couple times, despite the possibility of them not doing that. I think he's gone. But you think he's back, huh?
They've made worse use of roster spots than what you just said.
For
when you
sure.
look at last year, like Rashad Penny, Albert O. Why was
Alshon Jeffrey?
Alshon Jeffrey. Why was Mario Goodrich on the roster? They never even trusted him to play, but they kept him on the team for some reason. Anyway,
Yeah.
so they've used. It's not like the worst use of a roster spot they've ever done. I think it's more possible than people would think, because I think it's well, first of all, maybe this is my own bias blinding me. I think James Bradbury, I was very high on him coming off of last year, and clearly I was wrong to be, or that didn't age well. But
Yeah.
he allowed the lowest passer rating in the NFL in 2022.
Yeah.
So I have a hard time totally shaking. And also, I know he's older and quarterbacks certainly fall off. I don't totally dismiss that. But I look at Stephon Gilmore over here, and he's like 33, 34. He's older, and he still had like a good season last year. So I don't think it's impossible that there is some value left in James Bradbury. And I know our good friend Zebram has mentioned this too. There's kind of been like an on-off kind of thing going on with James Bradbury throughout his career. Like he's had like kind of a good year and then a bad year. He's kind of just kind of been like a player like that. I also think there's reasons in addition. Well, the physical decline thing might be real, and I feel like that's something where the Eagles will have like their own, tracking data, testing things that they can probably measure better, certainly, than we can. Now, obviously, we saw the eye test version of it, and it didn't look good. Not going to deny that, but also let's acknowledge that James Bradbury, I thought, was put in a tough spot last year in terms of being moved into the slot and moved back on outside. That's not like the easiest thing for a player. It doesn't mean he should be as bad as he was, but I'm saying like there were complicating factors and other things to consider here. And also, my understanding of James Bradbury and his personality is he kind of has a different kind of personality for a cornerback too. Where a lot of them are more like,
he's very quiet. Yeah,
Darius Slay, like brash, and I think you kind of have to have that at some level. And this isn't a criticism of James Bradbury, but I think he might be like more. He might have a more sober assessment of himself than other players,
right?
And also being in the position that he was with the Giants, where he got screwed because if they had cut him originally closer to the start of the offseason, before the Eagles ended up eventually signing him after they cut him later, he probably would have made more money. He would have gotten a better deal than he would have when he signed with the Eagles in whatever, like June or whatever. Because at that point, teams have already drafted players. They've spent their money. He kind of got screwed by them. So my thinking is, what if James Bradbury says, hey, I'll take a pay cut? Typically, players don't take.
No. Can he take a pay cut?
Why not?
Because his salary is like a little over $1 million.
Well, they could rework his deal, is my point. Maybe it's not a pay cut. I don't know exactly. But my point is, I think he might be more willing than, it's only. You're right. I guess he can't.
I don't even know if he can take a pay cut. I don't even know if it's possible.
So he's at $1.2 million in base salary in 2024.
Over the cap might not be as reliable as it was, specifically with the Eagles, because their contracts have gotten so weird, and it's hard to capture exactly what's going on with some of those contracts in the charts that they use. Yeah. So I might be wrong on that, but if you look the way that chart looks, it doesn't look like he can even take a pay cut.
That's an interesting point. Well, yeah, that's a good point. If he can, though, I think he might be more willing to do that than the average player would be, because
he's got self-awareness. I'm with you.
Yes, and I think he might realize that the market might not hold better things. I think he might realize the best situation actually might be for him here, and not because a lot of players would rather just get cut and feel like they can get a better opportunity or whatever elsewhere, where I think he might realize his best situation actually might be here, and I think he's more humbled and willing to take that kind of potential step back and realize that he's coming off this bad year and he will compete for a starting job and not necessarily just be handed it. So I'm more willing to bet that. And also just because, and I know the cap expanding kind of gives you more flexibility to designate him as a post June 1 cut.
Right.
Because you're taking on, that big hit when you're cutting him. So I think my case would be not that James Bradbury is amazing and he's definitely going to be awesome. I think he's more salvageable than I guess most people do. But it would take, him. I don't know how it would be possible with ever, and who knows the cap situation. But I think there's a better chance he's back than most people do. But if you're saying like, what's the most likely thing? I mean, I think the most likely thing is he's gone. But I just think it's not like 100% he's gone to me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. 2 disagreements already. I like it.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, we know it's boring.
Yeah.
Hassan Reddick. I'm not going to go too deep in this one, I guess, because we've talked about Hassan a lot with the trade rumors and whatnot. I still think he's back because, like, I feel like he has to be, unless the Eagles have this great plan to pivot to. I feel like I think Hassan is going to realize that what he's asking for, he's not going to quite get from other teams in terms of that big payday, because in the past, that money has never been there for him in free agency or anything. And therefore, I think he's going to come back to the Eagles, and I think the Eagles are going to be able to go up high enough to where it makes sense to keep him. And I don't think enough people have been talking. There's been a lot of talk about like what number do you need to get to annually, and I think that is relevant. But I also wonder like how much guarantee matters to him. Like, could you do something shorter term with like a really high guarantee or something, and obviously spread out the cap hit on the void years and whatever? Would he value that? And then get another chance to hit free agency again, as opposed to wanting this big long-term deal. I think that could potentially work, and that would potentially work best for both sides, because the Eagles are in this window where they're trying to very much make a lot of this season and win now still, and not trying to get worse this year, but would also allow Hassan Reddick to potentially get another big payday in the future. So I'm going to say stay.
Yeah, I think it's interesting what they did with him in terms of saying, go test the market before free agency even happens. And I think they're in a position to just kind of let the market come to them. They let his representation seek a trade, which means, of course, that they also allow them to explore what other teams are willing to pay him. So, they'll let the market dictate what Reddick is worth, both in terms of trade compensation and in terms of pay, and they can kind of go from there. Ultimately, I think that Reddick's representation won't find the combination of a team that's willing to pay him a whole lot more than what the Eagles are already paying him, and also a team that will give what the Eagles would require in trade compensation in order to let him go. So I think he's back. Let me throw out a hypo, though, for you. Reddick for L'Jarius Sneed, straight up. You got to pay Sneed $20 million a year for 5 years. 5 years, $100 million contract for Sneed.
I guess you do that at that point.
I would do it too.
I really like Reddick, so I have a tough time not wanting him on this team. And again, because you have to have a really good plan, I think, to pivot to. But I think that's a rare opportunity to get a really potentially. I like Snead a lot. He's a great player to get to fill a big hole there. And also, if you're just, it could be a situation where you just have to bite the bullet on the Reddick trade. Ultimately, if you're if you feel like you have to choose, between him and Josh Sweat, then I guess the scenario where
he's better, he's a lot better than Sweat in my opinion.
I'd rather choose Hassan Reddick, to be clear. But if you're telling me
younger, yeah.
But if you're selling it as, keeping Reddick versus having Josh Sweat and getting L'Jarius Sneed, that's obviously more appealing at that point.
Yeah.
But
to be clear, please don't aggregate that. There's no inside information here
Jimmy
at all.
said that is 100% happening with zero equivocation at all. I mean,
your
trading
hypo in this case. All right, who's next?
Zach Cunningham. What do you think?
I got him as a stay. I mean, I thought it was pretty revealing when Howie just brought him up unprompted about how good he thought he was last year. And then they went ahead and, I don't think they hired this guy because he was Zach Cunningham's coach, but they hired Bobby King, who to coach linebackers, who coached Cunningham both in Houston and Tennessee.
Yep.
So I think that guy will probably want to have Cunningham back.
Sure.
Not that guy's going to have any roster power at all on personnel or anything like that. But I think, that maybe factors into some very small degree. I think he's back. I think it's fine as long as he's not paying him that much. Certainly as a backup, he'd be perfectly fine. I don't know if you want him starting again, but if he had to, he was at least the Eagles' best linebacker definitively last year. So I don't have a problem with him coming back.
Yeah, Bobby King coached him from 2017 to 2022, except for the 2021 season. So he coached him for quite a bit there.
If that's the answer, that's not good. If he's like your answer as starting linebacker and Nakobe Dean as the other linebacker, and you're just filling in guys for depth purposes thereafter, unacceptable. But if you bring him back with also an eye toward bringing in a legit starter in addition, fine.
I think it's a situation where you obviously let him hit the market, but you stay in touch. You're like, hey, Zach, like keep in touch. Like, let's see, let us know what the kind of interest you're getting or whatever, and let's talk. Let's talk at some point. So I think you keep tabs on him. You let him hit free agency. You keep tabs on him. Kind of what you just touched on there. I think if Zach Cunningham is your second best linebacker, that's not terrible. If he's your best linebacker, that's not good enough. So I would be willing to kind of have him back, kind of like a little bit like the DeAndre Swift thing, where just like I'd wait out the market on him. I'd let the market come to you on that, and once his price tag goes, I mean, I don't think it'll be too high, but once it gets to a point,
nobody's going to be targeting him on day one of free agency.
Yeah,
so like you could do that with him for sure.
So I would just wait for the market to come to you on that one. Nicholas Morrow, I think we're both just going to keep this short and sweet. Yeah, it's just I think fairly or unfairly. Somewhat fairly, he's kind of was like the face of some of those unsuccessful signings last year, or it's more specifically, if that's too unfair, the face of like unsuccessful linebacker struggles. Like if you had to put like a picture of the Eagles linebacker struggles last year, it's probably like Nicholas Morrow getting dusted by like Deebo Samuel or something from the 49ers game. Like that's the one picture that like sums up the Eagles linebacker situation from last season, something like that. So
what's your Mount Rushmore of failed Eagles linebackers
in terms of like most hilarious, or
just looking back at him, you just went, oh, that guy?
I think Paul Warlow should be on there because it's kind of funny how much like they brought him back, and poor guy. I mean, he got hurt.
Levon Kirkland has to be on there.
I mean, that's before my time, but
yeah.
In terms of like me, like intimately knowing the team,
well, he just gave up plays all in the middle of the field
huge
all day. Yeah, he was like 300 pounds almost.
You know what's funny? I was actually
in the NFC Championship in the Rodney Barber game. They just tore him apart in the middle of the field.
My friend Holden sent me this text or this DM on Instagram yesterday of do you remember Gilbert Brown for the Packers?
Yes.
So he sent me this picture of like
he had an awesome face mask. Yeah.
Yeah. And also like,
visor,
his pads and everything too. It just, looks like a true football player. For some reason that made me think of Levon Kirkland. And I looked up Levon Kirkland.
He's huge. And he was 99. Like he was 93. He was 99 with the Steelers, I think.
Yeah. And is 6'1", listed at 6'1", 270. Like Kobe Dean is playing the same position in the NFL at 5'11", 229. And that might be like generous too. Just wild. And again,
a lot has changed in the NFL at linebacker.
But it's just like insane. Anyway, we both have Morrow. So who was on the Mount Rushmore? Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
I think Nate Gary's got to be on there.
I'm gonna put Corey Nelson on there. It's very funny that they just like signed him on the first day of free agency.
Yeah,
he didn't. Not only did he not make the team, he didn't even make like the
middle of camp. Yeah,
the 75. They cut down to 75 or whatever. Like that's just pretty tough. Also,
Morrow didn't make the team, by the way, either. He got cut. He got cut. Nicholas Morrow didn't make the team either. They brought him back.
Also, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Corey Nelson hurt Paul Warlow. He ran into Paul Warlow on the first day of OTAs, and like obviously not on purpose, but like so he was actually a really bad signing because he made your linebacker position even worse. There's friendly fire, and then I guess LJ Fort's kind of funny because he was actually a good player, but they didn't play him. They didn't play him at all.
Where'd he go? Baltimore, and then he was pretty good there.
Yeah, so great stuff. Okay, Sean Bradley, your boy.
So gone, because I think now what they'll do is they'll have Ben Van Sumeren ultimately take over his role as the guy who plays on special teams but doesn't actually play in the regular defense.
Maybe like Jonathan Gannon signs him, the Cardinals. I don't know.
Could be, yeah. But I think he's out. I mean, I don't even remember what his injury was. Was it an Achilles?
An ACL, Achilles. Like it was a big one for sure.
Yeah, so who even knows if a full recover and be the same player that he was.
We won't miss.
But they really like Van Sumeren as a special teamer.
Same,
and that's all. So Sean Bradley was going to give you anyway. So I think that kind of. And then also they brought in Brandon Smith.
Yes,
who they kind of liked as a special
I liked he didn't play much, but he had like some good special teams tackles when he did play.
So those two guys I think are both ahead of Sean Bradley if like Sean Bradley just didn't find anyone and he wound up in Eagles training camp somehow.
Sure.
I think both of those guys would be ahead of him as sort of the special teams only guy.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of, I mean, you might as well churn the roster there anyway. If you're looking for answers at linebacker, you feel like Sean Bradley's not going to be an answer for you, so just churn it over. Also, the annoying yell at the beginning of practice
the worst bit.
every single day. And just like, okay, first day of training camp, you're fired up. Okay, cool, whatever. And then just doing it every single day. And it didn't seem like anyone like enjoyed that. That was not, like, who was that for other than him?
Yeah.
Which I guess go off, but whatever. Not going to miss it. Anyway, another quick one here. Shaq Leonard, he's just cooked. I mean,
yeah,
just go. I just don't even think he can play in the NFL anymore. Like, he's
agreed.
And I feel bad because it's sad. He was a great player, and now his body is just not.
He was like a top 3 linebacker in the NFL not too long ago. Not anymore.
He's physically can't hang. Justin Evans, I don't know.
I think his career is over too.
Yeah, so I'm gonna say go, and then Bradley Roby, go. Obviously.
Oh my God, that's another guy that just you look back. I mean, the play that I will never get out of my head when I hear that name was him just getting trucked by Brock Purdy in that game. Just an unforgivable play. Do you remember that play? Like the 49ers were in the red zone and he had a clear chance to slam Brock Purdy on his ass. Brock Purdy just barely even put like a shoulder into him, and Roby went down like it was Christian Okoye running over some 160-pound corner. It's ridiculous. I'll never get that play out of my head when I hear that name.
That's a different one than the one where he was it in the playoff game or late in the season where he was like running at a player and he kind of just like threw his elbow into him.
That was him too.
That's not a tackle. I guess it wasn't.
I don't remember who that was against, but you're right. The Cardinals, maybe? Was it the Cardinals game?
I forget.
Where they just got ran all over.
It looked really bad.
But he was one of the worst tackling players, one of the worst tacklers I've ever seen put on an Eagles uniform.
And last but not least, not a defensive player, but Eagles long snapper Rick Lovato, who is a free agent. I both think we have him staying.
Yeah, I didn't realize he was a free agent, but yeah. Boom. He throws the ball through his legs with speed and accuracy.
Yeah, I don't think that he actually had his first career forced fumble, I think, on special. I don't think the Eagles ended up recovering that, but hey, cool. I mean, nice. We'll take it.
It's like one of those stats where you can go like, Rick Lovato had more forced fumbles than then you list like 10 Eagles.
Every Eagles linebacker, right? For
right.
Sure. Geez, I didn't think of it that way, but that is sadly probably very true. Okay. Any final thought?
Yeah, I guess the next event is the NFL owners meetings, which is at the end of March. But until then, well, actually, that's far from the next event, I guess. The next event is NFL free agency, which is
you mean like destination
somewhere, like where we go somewhere. But that's dumb. Nobody cares about that. That's only from my dumb perspective. But the next big thing.
It's interesting to hear their takes on who they sign or or don't sign.
But then March 11th, right, is the start of free agency.
That's like the
start of legal tampering, which I don't even know why they bother calling it that anymore. It's basically just free agency now. I mean, when they quote unquote agree to terms, they're not official until the 13th, which is a Wednesday. The 11th is Monday. 13th is a Wednesday. So that'll be fun. I think free agency is going to be fun this year. Like last year was more like It was more like, who are they going to lose? Like, who are they? What guys are they going to lose? And then for me, that was a gold mine for my compensatory pick posts. My compensatory pick tracker was one of my most trafficked articles of the year last year. I think it was like just below the dumpster fire ones, and then like that was right up there with those. So that won't be as fun to track this year. But
they won't be getting any this year, right?
It'll be more fun free agency for the Eagles because actually they're going to sign guys. They're going to sign legit players this year.
So they probably won't be getting. I mean, they'll be getting picks from last year for this year, literally.
Correct.
In terms of they won't be building up their formula this year to get picks next year, right?
Correct.
Probably not, because who would even sign to qualify? Like maybe DeAndre Swift, maybe Fletcher Cox. But anything you do, as you mentioned there, is going to be wiped out by also probably the players you sign, which is fine. I mean, like comp picks aren't the goal. That's like, like we need comp picks. It's like rather have good players, but if you're going to be losing good players, it's nice to in the case of like Javon Hargrave, get like a 3rd round pick.
They'll get a 3 for him, yeah, and they'll get 5s. They'll get 3 5s in addition to Hargrave.
For like what, like TJ Edwards and
I mean, there were
a bunch of players, but like those kind of
players
guys
that qualified. But yeah, TJ Edwards I think was one.
CJ,
and I forget the
like
3rd guy
Marcus
that would qualify.
Epps
no,
or-
Andre Dillard was the other guy that qualifies at 5.
Wow. Such an insane contract.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. Yeah, I don't think I have a ton of final thoughts. So let's just wrap.
But we'll have a big free agency preview. I think. What's today? The 1st.
We have to do our annual free agent draft that we do. We draft the most likely Eagles free agent signings. I think I've done well on that in recent years. Did we do one last year? I don't remember.
I'm pretty sure we did.
I have to look at the results of that. I don't remember if we did.
I remember the one year we were both like the number 1 overall pick was big because we both.
It was Zach Pascal.
Yeah.
And yeah, I got the first pick because we did a coin flip.
I broke that too, by the way. I broke it like basically at the same time as Adam Schefter. I might have beat him by like 30 seconds or something like that.
Yeah.
And then nobody cites you when everyone just goes according to Adam Schefter. And no. I had that shit. Screw that. And I had an article done too. It wasn't even just a tweet. I had a full article on that.
Yeah. But no one cares, Jimmy.
Jerks.
I can't find it if I do have it. So I don't know. But in any case, we'll do our updated version of that this year. That'll be fun to see, I guess. And because I'm also probably going to try to put together at some point, my annual free agent connections post. I like to, look back at which players have connections to the Eagles coaching staff, and that'll be more fun to do this offseason after,
You do a good job on that, and then
Thanks.
Also
and that's it. Those are the only
draft
2 things.
Stuff with all like the
tracker.
top 30 visits,
Yeah.
the private workout,
right?
Positional coach visited their pro day.
The visits, yeah.
Yeah, that takes. I'm sure that takes a long time to do, doesn't it?
Yeah, it would be like yes, but worth it. Okay, this was BGN Radio 383. We appreciate you listening, rating, reviewing, subscribing on Apple Podcasts. Let's get some new reviews in there. We are on the march, Jimmy, to 2,000 ratings or reviews, I believe.
Oh, wow.
Those are actually
right?
2 different things. We are at 1,946 ratings.
Oh.
So, yeah, we're not too far away. Let's get come on. Let's get to 2,000. If you haven't,
how many stars do we have?
That's what I don't know. I can't see that as easily from what I'm looking at here in terms of the. Oh, you're talking. Wait, what do you mean?
Like 4 point whatever.
Oh, 4.8 out of 5.
Oh, that's pretty. So like you go to like Amazon, for example, and if you see like, it's got like 4, it's 4.6 or 4. Like if I'm looking to buy, I don't know, like a chainsaw, and it's got like a
interesting.
I don't know how I thought a chainsaw.
That comes to mind.
4.6, but it's only got like 6 reviews. You're like, that doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything. But if, it's 4.6, but you got like the thing's got like 1,000 reviews or 5,000 reviews. Oh, okay, well that's legit. So yeah, it's nice to have good reviews, but also a lot of reviews when you have good reviews. So yeah,
we're so close.
4.8 and 2,000 reviews, pretty good. A little pat on the back for us.
I appreciate it.
And thank you all for reviewing us so kindly.
Thank you.
I didn't. This is a revelation to me. I didn't even know that. I'd never check any of that stuff because.
Wow. Jimmy doesn't care about the audience. I think you just let's frame it as you trust me to inform you. So
yeah. I also try not to listen to sort of what people think about me.
You're like a football player.
I don't want to change. I don't want to change what I do.
You don't want to get too high. You don't want to get too low. Just right like a player.
Yeah, right. Like some players have rabbit ears a little too much and can get into their own head. I try to avoid being that actually. So, but it's nice to hear 4.8 for 2,000 reviews. Pretty good.
But again, we're only 54 away from 2,000. So let's just get there. If you haven't already, go to Apple Podcast.
And thank you all.
Yeah,
much appreciated.
We appreciate it. It's pretty awesome. That should not be taken for granted. We love you. We appreciate you. But we'll love you even more if you help us get to 2,000 because that's a fun benchmark to hit. And we're almost there. So why not help us do that? If you have not been watching the episodes on YouTube and you want to, you can do that by subscribing to the Bleeding Green Nation YouTube channel. Jimmy is waving to the audience right now. We've had some visuals with the ads and whatnot. The ticker thing we've talked about is at the bottom of the screen, as you can see there. I think you can also hit the bell. I feel weird using the YouTube terms. It just feels very funny to me, but I like it. I think if you hit the bell, you actually get notified when a new video drops. So you're like, hey, when's that new episode of BGN Radio out? Boom, you hit that, you get a notification, and you can watch it right away. So perfect for your consumption. Check out our sponsors information is in the episode description below. You can check those out. You can check out our social media handles, which are actually on the screen here on the YouTube version, but also in the episode description as well. Shout out to our wonderful producer, Rachel Prevet, who puts all this together behind the scenes and does a great job of keeping the ship afloat. We appreciate her and all of the wonderful members of the Bleeding Green Nation podcast feed. Jimmy and I will be back with you at some point next week. I think I'm going to Florida, Jimmy, at the end of next week. So we have to figure out when we're going to Clearwater for my friend's bachelor party. I think we're going to go to Phillies game.
Okay. Those tickets are like, I was thinking about going down there too. Tickets are expensive.
We got standing room only for like $27 each. So yeah, we're just going to do that. And I also think we might be going to the Flyers game down there because I think they're going to be playing the Lightning at that point.
Okay.
So interested to see that. Yeah. All right.
Where do they play? St. Pete's?
I don't know. I have no idea. I'm not in charge of planning. I'm along for the ride.
Clearwater's a cool town. Clearwater Beach specifically, very cool. Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that. Should be a good time. But yeah, we'll figure out what our recording schedule is. In the meantime, plenty of good episodes on the Bleeding Green Nation podcast feed, whether that's on the Shane page with Johnny and Shane breaking down free agency and whatnot. Plenty of great content on with the NFC East mixtape that just dropped late this week, but is now up with me and RJ Ochoa. Also on bleedinggreennation.com, you have Johnny Page's all 22, his film breakdowns and whatnot. And Jimmy Kempski has great work available at phillyvoice.com. So check all that out, and we will be back with you as I delay to try to get the end of show screen up here next week.
Good. Bye, everybody.